That's right, Ludo.
Labyrinth, 20 shocking facts you didn't know. It seemed like a fairy tale spun from glitter and dreams. Jim Henson's Labyrinth promised a magical world of puppets, music, and childhood wonder. But behind the shimmering masquerade and David Bowie's unforgettable presence, a stranger story lurked. A film that stumbled at the box office, only to rise from the ashes as a cult obsession. Costumes that carried hidden symbolism, casting choices that shocked parents, and a production haunted by creative battles, surreal experiments, and shadows of failure. Was Labyrinth truly the enchanting fantasy it appeared to be? Or was it a desperate gamble that nearly destroyed its creators? How did Bowie's performance blur the lines between menace and allure? And what secrets were left buried in Henson's dreamlike maze of illusions? Prepare to uncover 20 shocking facts about Labyrinth, the truths that slipped between the cracks of its magical facade. Shocking Fact 1. David Bowie. Almost turned down. Jareth, when people think of Labyrinth, they think of David Bowie. His voice, his costumes, his piercing gaze as the Goblin King. But Bowie almost didn't take the role at all. At first, the script felt strange to him, too whimsical, too far removed from the rock and roll persona he had carefully crafted. Jim Henson, desperate to secure Bowie, flew across the world to personally pitch the project. He didn't talk about goblins or fantasy kingdoms. Instead, he told Bowie the story was about adolescence, temptation, and power, things Bowie knew all too well. The persuasion worked. Bowie signed on, but with one condition: he wanted to write the songs himself. Without his haunting music, Labyrinth might have lost the dangerous edge that turned Jareth into more than a fairy tale villain. It's chilling to imagine the film without him. Would it even have achieved cult status at all? Or would the Goblin King have faded into obscurity without his rock legend crown?
You remind me of the babe.
What babe?
Babe with the power.
What power?
Power of voodoo.
Who do?
You do.
Bowie's touch turned Labyrinth from a whimsical fantasy into an unforgettable, darkly magical legend. Shocking Fact 2. The creepy inspiration behind the goblins. The goblins of Labyrinth look like nightmares brought to life, grotesque, mischievous, and disturbingly human. Their inspiration was just as unsettling. Jim Henson instructed his design team not to make monsters, but creatures that felt like distorted reflections of real people. Each goblin was based on specific human traits: an annoying neighbor, a petty boss, or a selfish child. The result was uncanny. Faces that looked familiar, but twisted. Brian Froud, the film's conceptual artist, drew goblins obsessively, often sketching them from distorted caricatures of those around him. Some crew members even swore they recognized themselves in the designs. For Jennifer Connelly, who spent long days surrounded by dozens of puppets, the effect was eerie. She described moments on set when the goblins, though motionless, seemed to stare back at her. What began as playful fantasy became a hall of mirrors, where every flaw of humanity was grotesquely exaggerated. The goblins weren't just puppets, they were us. In Labyrinth, fantasy mirrored reality, twisted, unsettling, and impossible to forget. Shocking fact. 3. Jennifer Connelly's struggle on set. At just 14 years old, Jennifer Connelly carried Labyrinth on her shoulders. She was in nearly every scene, often surrounded by towering puppets, elaborate set pieces, and demanding choreography. But behind her graceful performance was a grueling struggle. Connelly often worked 12-hour days, memorizing long monologues while performing complex movements with animatronics. Unlike Bowie, who thrived on stage presence, Connelly was still finding her voice. She admitted years later that she often felt overwhelmed, intimidated by the scale of the production and by Bowie's magnetic presence. Some days, she burst into tears after difficult takes, exhausted and unsure if she was good enough. Yet Henson pushed her, insisting she was the emotional anchor of the story. In hindsight, her youthful vulnerability became her greatest strength, perfectly embodying Sarah's journey from innocence to maturity. Still, the pressure left scars. For Connolly, Labyrinth wasn't just a movie. It was a trial by fire, forcing a teenager to grow up under the weight of fantasy's heaviest crown.
Dance, magic, dance. Dance, magic, dance. Drop magic.
Connolly emerged stronger, her teenage trials forging a performance that remains spellbinding decades later. Shocking Fact 4: The dangerous stunts. Nobody talks about fantasy may look safe on screen, but Labyrinth's set was fraught with real danger. Connolly performed many of her own stunts, including running through collapsing sets and dangling from precarious platforms. In one scene, Sarah falls down a tunnel lined with grasping hands. To capture this, Connolly was strapped into a harness and lowered repeatedly through a vertical shaft, surrounded by dozens of crew members controlling puppet hands. A single mistake could have caused serious injury. Even Bowie wasn't exempt. During the ballroom sequence, his elaborate cape caught on stage props more than once, nearly pulling him off balance. Yet both stars pushed forward, committed to the illusion of magic. For a film marketed as family-friendly fantasy, the risks were shockingly real. The Goblin King's world may have been an illusion, but the bruises, cuts, and close calls behind the camera were anything but imaginary. Behind the magic, danger lurked at every turn, proving that creating fantasy sometimes comes at a very real cost. Shocking Fact 5: The puppet that terrified the cast. Among the many puppets that brought Labyrinth to life, one stood out, not for its beauty, but for the fear it inspired. The fiery creatures known as the Fireys, with detachable heads and wild movements, were designed to be playful. But in practice, they unsettled everyone on set. Operated by multiple puppeteers in black suits against a blue screen, the Fireys moved with chaotic, unpredictable energy. Jennifer Connelly later admitted the sequence unnerved her, as the creatures swarmed her character, pulling and clawing in ways that felt disturbingly real. Even crew members found the Fireys unnerving, their empty-eyed faces and jerky movements resembling something out of a fever dream. The scene was so difficult to film that it nearly didn't make the final cut. But Henson insisted. It embodied the nightmarish chaos of Sarah's journey. Ironically, what terrified the cast became one of the film's most surreal and unforgettable sequences, blurring the line between puppet magic and genuine horror. The Fireys proved that in Labyrinth, the most memorable magic often comes wrapped in pure chaos. Shocking Fact 6: Bowie's songs were nearly replaced. It's impossible to imagine Labyrinth without David Bowie's haunting soundtrack, Magic Dance, As the World Falls Down, Within You. But shockingly, the studio once considered replacing his songs altogether. Executives worried that Bowie's pop-rock style clashed with Jim Henson's fairy tale world. They pushed for a more traditional orchestral score, something sweeping and safe. Bowie was furious. His condition for playing Jareth had always been tied to his music, and he threatened to walk if his creative contributions were stripped away. Henson backed him, but the fight left scars. Some of Bowie's early demos were cut, and several songs were shortened to appease nervous producers. Still, the ones that survived became the soul of the film. Magic Dance, in particular, nearly didn't make it. Executives thought it was too silly. Ironically, it became the movie's most iconic number. Without Bowie's music, Labyrinth would have been visually dazzling but emotionally hollow. His songs weren't just background. They were the Goblin King's siren call.
Everything I've done for you.
Bowie's music proved irreplaceable, turning Labyrinth from a visual spectacle into an unforgettable emotional journey. Shocking fact. 7. The hidden hands that haunt the tunnel scene. One of the most haunting visuals in Labyrinth comes when Sarah falls into the Helping Hands tunnel, hundreds of eerie hands forming faces, speaking, and carrying her deeper into darkness. The sequence looks magical on screen, but behind the scenes, it was a logistical nightmare. To create it, Henson recruited over 100 crew members, each wearing specially designed latex gloves that formed mouths, eyes, or noses. The tunnel itself was vertical, not horizontal, meaning Jennifer Connelly was suspended by a harness while dozens of hands grabbed at her. For Connelly, the experience was claustrophobic and terrifying. She was surrounded by darkness, pulled and pushed by real human arms with no escape. Many crew members admitted later that the set felt nightmarish even to them, like being trapped in a writhing, living wall. Though the sequence lasted only minutes on screen, it required days of exhausting takes. What audiences saw as eerie fantasy was, in truth, a suffocating ordeal. Those grasping hands weren't just puppets. They were real, reaching from the shadows.
How do you know? He could be telling the truth.
But then you wouldn't be.
The Helping Hands tunnel blurred fantasy and fear, proving that some of cinema's most magical moments come at a very human cost. Shocking fact 8. The optical illusion that broke the crew. The climactic Escher-inspired staircase scene, where Sarah chases baby Toby through a gravity-defying labyrinth, nearly broke the film crew. The set was designed to mimic M.C. Escher's famous artwork Relativity, filled with staircases leading in impossible directions. To create the illusion, cameras were tilted, platforms built at dangerous angles, and Bowie himself had to perform while navigating disorienting slopes. The crew struggled daily to line up shots correctly. One small mistake shattered the illusion. Jennifer Connelly, already nervous from the physical demands, often lost her balance. Even seasoned puppeteers struggled to position goblins convincingly within the warped geometry. Frustration mounted as the scene dragged on for weeks, but Henson refused to give up. He believed the Escher set was the symbolic heart of the movie, a metaphor for Sarah's confusing passage into adulthood. The final effect stunned audiences, but behind the artistry was sheer chaos. What looked like dreamlike wonder was built on exhaustion, bruises, and maddening precision.
Well then, come on, which way?
The Escher staircase proved that cinematic wonder often hides relentless chaos behind the scenes. Shocking fact. 9. A deleted scene. Fans were never meant to see Labyrinth hides a secret few know, a deleted scene that could have dramatically changed Sarah's journey. Early cuts of the film included a musical sequence where Jareth sings directly to Sarah, attempting to seduce her before the masquerade ball. The scene was meant to blur the line between villain and lover, deepening the unsettling attraction between them. But test audiences found it too uncomfortable. Sarah was only a teenager after all, and the undertones disturbed parents. Henson reluctantly cut the scene, though Bowie reportedly loved the performance. The footage was locked away, surfacing only in rumors and rare production stills. Fans have long speculated what impact it might have had, turning the film into something darker, more dangerous. Without it, Jareth remains ambiguous, a figure of temptation, but never fully realized as a romantic predator. The lost scene lingers in legend, an alternate version of Labyrinth too unsettling for its time.
Surrounded.
The deleted scene became a whispered legend, hinting at a darker labyrinth that might have changed everything. Shocking fact. 10. The strange symbolism of the crystal balls. One of Jareth's most iconic props is the crystal ball, sliding effortlessly across his hands, spinning and floating as if alive. To audiences, it looked like pure sorcery. But the truth behind those crystals is stranger than fiction. The trick was performed not by Bowie, but by master juggler Michael Moschen, hidden just off camera. Moschen stood behind Bowie, blindly reaching around his body to manipulate the orbs without seeing them. Every move had to be perfectly timed, as one slip could ruin the shot. Beyond the technical marvel, the crystal balls carried layered symbolism. They represented temptation, illusion, and control. Jareth's ability to mesmerize and manipulate Sarah. Henson loved them so much, he rewrote scenes to showcase them, even when it slowed down filming. Bowie himself became fascinated with the orbs, incorporating their imagery into later performances. The crystals weren't just props. They were symbols of power, desire, and distraction. In many ways, they embodied the film itself, dazzling, hypnotic, but hiding a complex truth beneath the glittering surface. The crystal balls dazzled on screen, embodying Labyrinth's magic, while concealing the meticulous art and risk behind every move. Shocking fact 11. Why critics hated the film at first. When Labyrinth premiered in 1986, audiences didn't flock to theaters. Critics were even harsher. Roger Ebert called the film labyrinthine in more ways than one, and complained that it was visually dazzling but emotionally hollow. Others dismissed it as a self-indulgent vanity project, Jim Henson's overblown puppet showcase, paired awkwardly with David Bowie's rock star theatrics. Parents complained about its darker undertones, arguing it was too frightening for children, yet too childish for adults. The backlash devastated Jim Henson, who had poured his heart into the project. He believed Labyrinth would be his magnum opus, the film that proved puppetry could achieve the artistry of live-action cinema. Instead, it was branded a box office disappointment, earning only a fraction of its budget on release. Ironically, the very elements critics mocked, its strangeness, its dreamlike logic, its mixture of innocence and danger, would later make it a cult classic. But in 1986, the reaction was brutal. For Henson, the sting never fully faded.
Fire! Hey! I just fired you!
Initially dismissed and misunderstood, Labyrinth's magic would take years to find the audience it truly deserved. Shocking fact. 12. Jim Henson's biggest regret. Behind Jim Henson's gentle smile was a man plagued by perfectionism. Though he adored Labyrinth, he carried a private regret: the film's tone. Henson later admitted he worried it was too adult for children and too childish for adults. This in-between space left audiences confused, and he blamed himself for not steering the story more clearly. The failure weighed heavily on him, especially after the crushing box office results. Those close to Henson recall him replaying scenes, wondering if he'd pushed the fantasy too far into unsettling territory. He questioned whether the darker themes of temptation and control overshadowed Sarah's innocence. After Henson's death in 1990, his son Brian revealed that Labyrinth had been his father's most personal project, the one he wished had found the audience it deserved in his lifetime. The regret was bittersweet. Though the world eventually embraced the film, Henson never lived to see the love it would inspire.
Sarah.
Henson's bittersweet legacy reminds us that even genius can be haunted by doubt, and that true art often outlives its creator. Shocking fact. 13. The secret behind Bowie's hypnotic eyes. David Bowie's otherworldly stare in Labyrinth wasn't just the product of good lighting, it was real. Bowie had a condition called anisocoria, caused by a teenage fistfight that left one pupil permanently dilated. The result was mesmerizing. His eyes appeared two different colors, creating an illusion of constant intensity. On screen, this made Jareth seem even more supernatural, as though he could see deeper into Sarah, and into us. Jim Henson played into the effect, designing lighting setups that highlighted Bowie's gaze. Some fans even believed his eyes were artificially enhanced for the film, though it was entirely natural. Bowie himself rarely spoke about the injury, but he understood its impact. For Jareth, it became part of the character's allure, making him both beautiful and unsettling. In a story about illusions, manipulation, and power, Bowie's gaze became symbolic. Two eyes, two truths, two realities. It's a reminder that sometimes the most haunting effects in cinema aren't special effects at all, but scars we carry into the spotlight.
We're choosing a path between the stars.
Bowie's gaze proved that real-life imperfections can create the most unforgettable illusions on screen. Shocking fact. 14. The bizarre fan mail Jennifer Connelly received. When Labyrinth hit home video and slowly grew its cult following, Jennifer Connelly became an unlikely icon. Fans wrote her letters filled with admiration, but also strange obsessions. Some insisted Sarah and Jareth were destined lovers, sending Connelly poetry and artwork depicting her teenage character locked in eternal romance with Bowie's Goblin King. Others mailed handmade dolls, crystals, and even goblin masks, hoping she would keep them as tokens of the Labyrinth. At just 15 when the film premiered, Connelly was unsettled by the intensity. She later admitted she didn't understand the depth of the movie's impact until years later, when fans approached her at conventions still dressed as Sarah. What began as bizarre and even uncomfortable attention eventually became a testament to Labyrinth's enduring legacy. But in the early days, those letters were a reminder. The Goblin King wasn't the only one capable of obsession.
I have sworn with my lifeblood, no one shall pass this way without my...
Connelly's teen stardom revealed that Labyrinth's magic could enchant and unnerve in equal measure. Shocking fact 15. How Labyrinth bankrupted a studio behind the glittering sets and puppetry magic was a financial disaster. Labyrinth cost around $25 million to make, a huge budget for 1986, especially for a fantasy film with no guaranteed audience. When it flopped at the box office, grossing just over $12 million in the US, the fallout was catastrophic. TriStar Pictures, the studio behind the release, had banked heavily on the film's success. Executives believed Jim Henson's name, paired with David Bowie's star power, would guarantee a hit. Instead, they were left with staggering losses. The disappointment shook Henson deeply, but it also strained relationships behind the scenes. Some within TriStar blamed the failure on marketing, arguing the movie had been sold as a children's fantasy, leaving adults uninterested and parents wary of its darker tone. Others pointed fingers at Bowie's eccentric performance. The truth is, the film was simply too strange for mainstream audiences at the time. Labyrinth may be a beloved cult classic now, but in 1986, it nearly bankrupted the very studio that dared to release it. Labyrinth's box office bomb proved that groundbreaking art doesn't always pay its own way, at least not at first. Shocking Fact 16: the prop that went missing for decades. Among the film's many strange legacies is one peculiar mystery: the disappearance of a key prop. The original Goblin King's crystal orbs, used in filming, vanished shortly after production wrapped. Crew members assumed they'd been packed into storage with the rest of the puppets and costumes, but when archivists went looking years later, the orbs were gone. Rumors swirled that a crew member had kept them as a private souvenir, while others speculated they were accidentally sold off with unrelated props. For years, fans scoured auctions and estate sales, hoping the iconic objects might resurface. Then, decades later, one crystal appeared at a private memorabilia auction, confirmed authentic by Jim Henson's Creature Shop veterans. The price? Over $20,000. To this day, the whereabouts of the others remain a mystery. Like the film itself, the crystals became legends, symbols of how Labyrinth slipped from a forgotten flop into a treasure that collectors and fans would chase across time itself.
Saludo, wait for me! Oh, Ambrosius!
The missing crystals became as legendary as the film, proof that Labyrinth's magic still sparks obsession decades later. Shocking Fact 17: the dark mythology behind Jareth's character. Jareth wasn't just a glittering villain invented for the screen, his character was steeped in folklore. Jim Henson and co-writer Terry Jones drew on centuries of European fairy tales about goblin kings, tricksters, and changelings. In old myths, goblins were often depicted as stealing children and replacing them with enchanted doubles. Jareth embodied that archetype, offering Sarah her deepest desires in exchange for her brother's freedom. But there was an even darker layer. Some scholars believe Jareth represents the predatory figures often hidden in folklore. Older, seductive forces that test young women on the cusp of adulthood. The masquerade ball scene, with its surreal mix of beauty and menace, plays into this tradition. Bowie's magnetic performance blurred the line between protector and predator, making Jareth both terrifying and irresistible. Henson wanted Jareth to be more than a villain. He was temptation personified, a test of Sarah's strength and independence. The mythology beneath his glittering facade gave the character a timeless, unsettling resonance that still sparks debate decades later.
What's going on?
Beneath Bowie's glittering guise, Jareth embodied timeless temptation. A character as mesmerizing as he was unsettling. Shocking Fact 18: the casting choices that could have changed everything before David Bowie was locked in as Jareth. Several other stars were considered. Michael Jackson was one of the most serious contenders, with executives pushing for his global appeal. Sting and Mick Jagger were also floated as possibilities, each offering a different flavor of rock star charisma. But it wasn't just the Goblin King role that almost looked different. Sarah's casting was equally uncertain. Hundreds of young actresses auditioned, including Helena Bonham Carter and Sarah Jessica Parker. In the end, Henson chose Bowie and Jennifer Connelly for a deliberate reason: their unlikely pairing. He wanted the dynamic between them to feel strange, dissonant, even uncomfortable. Had Jackson or Sting been chosen, the film might have leaned further into pop spectacle. Had another actress taken Sarah's role, the tone could have shifted entirely. In casting Bowie and Connelly, Henson chose chemistry over safety, and the film's haunting tension was born.
Watch out!
Casting choices nearly rewrote Labyrinth, but Bowie and Connelly's uneasy chemistry became its haunting heartbeat. Shocking Fact 19: the haunting afterlife of the Labyrinth. The elaborate sets built for Labyrinth were some of the most ambitious of their era. Massive stone corridors, sprawling goblin villages, and the Escher-inspired finale. But once filming ended, they met a strange fate. Many were dismantled, their pieces reused for smaller productions. Others were abandoned, left to rot in storage facilities. For years, fragments of the Labyrinth lay forgotten, covered in dust. Some crew members claimed the sets carried an eerie energy, as if the puppets and walls themselves retained echoes of the film's unsettling magic. Fans who visited prop warehouses reported stumbling across goblin masks and fragments of the Helping Hands tunnel, still intact but decaying. Today, only a handful of original set pieces survive in private collections or museum archives. The rest remain lost to time. The Labyrinth itself, once tangible and real, now exists only in memory and film. A haunting reminder that even magic fades when the cameras stop rolling.
Hey, don't you want to look like us? Take off your head! I want her!
The Labyrinth sets faded into memory, leaving only film and legend to preserve their eerie magic. Shocking Fact 20. How Labyrinth became a cult classic against all odds. When Labyrinth first released, it was labeled a failure. But as years passed, the film quietly transformed into something more powerful, a cult phenomenon. The rise of VHS in the late 1980s gave it a second life, allowing new audiences to discover its strange, enchanting world. By the 1990s, it had become a staple at midnight movie screenings, where fans quoted lines, sang along to Bowie's songs, and even dressed as goblins and Sarah. Conventions and fan clubs followed, spreading the film's mythology across generations. What once seemed too weird for mainstream audiences became beloved precisely because of its weirdness. Bowie's Jareth turned into a gothic icon, while Henson's puppetry was re-evaluated as visionary. Today, Labyrinth stands as one of the most celebrated cult films of all time. Its failure became its strength, its flaws, its charm. Against all odds, the Goblin King won in the end, not at the box office, but in the hearts of millions who still wander his labyrinth.
Brutus, will you come here? Brutus, come here right now!
Labyrinth's oddness became its triumph, proving that true magic often finds its audience, just not on opening weekend. Labyrinth wasn't only a fantasy, it was a dreamscape stitched together with glitter, music, and myth, but also with risk, failure, and artistic defiance. Maybe that's why it continues to haunt us, because it was never just a children's story. It was a reflection of wonder and fear colliding in one strange, unforgettable vision. If this revealed sides of Labyrinth you never knew, share your favorite secret or fact in the comments. And be sure to like and subscribe for more hidden stories behind cinema's most mysterious creations. Remember, not all magic is innocent.